What I'm about to share is the most terrifying experience of my life, as well as my ex-girlfriend's. I'm writing this of my own choice, but I had to ask for her permission before actually sending it out with the hope of it being shared. Her one condition was that I tell the absolute truth about what happened and that whoever reads it does so with respect. So, with that out of the way, here's the story. In 2012, my then-girlfriend, Emma, not her real name, and I decided to go on a day-long hike in a remote area of northern Oregon. The region, known as Redwood Valley, lies along the Brook River near State Route 97, nestled between the Iron Ridge Mountains to the north and the Pine Wilderness to the south. The valley is sparsely populated, with only a few hundred residents scattered in homes and cabins, some of which are only reachable by winding dirt roads that stretch for miles off the main highways. Something I wish I had known before we visited is that Redwood Valley has a long history of seclusion and independence. Decades ago, some of the early settlers there discovered gold and attempted to form their own independent state, separate from Oregon and California, to avoid paying taxes. What started as a simple rebellion against taxation eventually attracted others who were drawn to the idea of living outside the system. Rebels, fugitives, and people who simply wanted to disappear. Even though the original settlers were long gone by the mid-1900s, the valley maintained a reputation as a place where outsiders and outlaws could hide. And, as I learned firsthand, that reputation wasn't just a myth. Emma and I arrived in the valley around noon. After grabbing a quick bite, we set off on our hike, planning to take a looping trail that would lead us past Eagle Rock and back toward town. At first, the experience was perfect. The air was crisp with the scent of pine, and the hike was a great way for us to reconnect, given how little time we had together due to our busy work schedules. Around 3:30 p.m., we were making our way up a gentle slope, feeling the burn but still enjoying ourselves, when we stumbled upon something unusual. Throughout our hike, we had passed small side trails, some of which we explored. But this time, after walking down a narrow path for about 100 yards, we came across an old wooden cabin hidden in a clearing, partially obscured by thick bushes. It would have looked quaint and inviting if not for the rusty pickup truck parked haphazardly in front of it, its driver's side door left wide open. Even stranger, the cabin's front door was also ajar. As we approached, a man suddenly stepped outside. He was of average build, probably in his late 30s at most, and when he saw us, he smiled and waved. "Afternoon, folks. You two are pretty far off the main trail, aren't you?" His words seemed friendly enough, but his eyes darted over us a little too much. I told him we were just out enjoying a hike, keeping the conversation light. We exchanged small talk about the weather for a minute or two, but when I mentioned we needed to get going, he offered us a cup of coffee inside his cabin. We politely declined, saying we had a schedule to keep so we wouldn't be driving home in the dark. But he wouldn't take no for an answer. As he stepped closer, his insistence felt less like hospitality and more like desperation. I glanced at Emma, seeing the same unease in her eyes, and we instinctively began backing away. That's when he reached behind his back and pulled out a gun. "Get inside, now." Fear locked us in place, but when he raised the gun, we knew we had no choice. He kept the weapon trained on us as he forced us inside, slamming and locking the door behind us. Emma, her voice shaking, asked who he was talking about when he muttered, "They'll be here any minute." He ignored her and shoved us into a corner, ordering us to sit on the floor. I tried to show a little courage by repeating Emma's question, but before I could finish my sentence, he rushed over and struck me in the face with the handle of his gun. Emma screamed, but he barked at her to be quiet. Blood ran down my cheek, and when Emma asked if she could help, he scoffed, "What's the point? You'll all be dead soon anyway." Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. I whispered to Emma that we were going to be okay, even though I had no idea if that was true. I searched the room for anything that could be used as a weapon, but there was nothing. Just one door, one way in, one way out. Then, in the distance, we heard the low hum of a helicopter. The man stiffened, muttering, "They're here." Outside, the rumble of approaching vehicles followed. The man ran to the window, yelling, "I've got hostages. Come any closer, and they're dead." A voice outside called over a loudspeaker, ordering him to come out with his hands up. In response, he grabbed Emma, dragged her to the window, and pressed the barrel of his gun against her temple. "Show your face," he screamed. "I want them to see when I pull the trigger." Emma sobbed as I tried to comfort her, repeating, "It's going to be okay." Tension hung thick in the air. Then the man turned the gun on me. "Kneel," he ordered. My legs felt weak, but I obeyed. As I lowered myself to the floor, he pressed the gun against the back of my head, shouting threats at the officers outside. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I closed my eyes, bracing for the inevitable. Then bang. Then another. Then another. I fell forward, convinced I was dead. But as the ringing in my ears subsided, I realized I wasn't. The man lay on the floor, struggling for breath, his body riddled with bullets from the SWAT officers who had stormed in. I watched in shock as the life drained from him, barely registering a SWAT officer's voice asking if I was okay. Aside from my wounded cheek, Emma and I were unharmed. The officers cleared the area, then drove us back into town, where we gave our statements before being allowed to leave. Took a long time before I felt steady enough to drive. Emma sat in the passenger seat, alternating between quiet sobs and uncontrollable wailing. I cried too, out of fear, out of relief. We made it out alive, but we both knew we'd carry that day with us forever. We stayed together for a few more years before breaking up in 2015. It was amicable. We live in different cities now, but we still keep in touch, and whenever we talk, the subject of that day in Redwood Valley always seems to come up. Therapy helped Emma, but as she put it, nothing compares to talking to someone who was actually there. A few years back, some buddies and I planned a hiking trip with an overnight stay on a well-known trail. That weekend is still crystal clear in my memory, though part of me wishes I could forget it entirely. It was supposed to be a simple, laid-back getaway. Just the three of us setting off after weeks of planning. The first day was everything we could have hoped for. We were pumped to get away, crack open a few drinks, and take a break from daily life. We spent hours trekking, cracking jokes, sharing stories, and playfully arguing over who was the greatest quarterback in 49ers history. Eventually, we found a good spot to set up camp, not too far from a flowing but shallow stream. Once we pitched our tents, we got busy gathering wood for the fire. While the guys handled that, I wandered down to the water to clean up a bit. To put it simply, it had been a sweaty day. I took off my shirt, watch, and necklace, rinsed my shirt in the cool water, and used it to wipe down my upper body. I was almost certain I had slipped my watch into my pocket, but when I got back to camp and reached for it, it was gone. I retraced my steps, scanning the ground carefully, but I couldn't find it. It wasn't an expensive watch or anything, so it wasn't a huge deal, but I kept wondering, where the heck did it go? In the end, I figured the strap must have caught on my pocket's edge, and it had fallen into the stream while I was leaning over. Sucked, but that's life. The rest of the trip went smoothly. Nothing weird happened that night. The next morning, we packed up and started hiking back toward the car. We were almost at the end of the trail, less than 100 yards from the parking lot, when one of my friends spotted something up ahead, hanging from a tree branch. "Dude, what is that?" he asked, puzzled. I followed his gaze, and there it was, my watch loosely wrapped around a branch just dangling there. At first, my friend thought it was just a crazy coincidence. "Can you imagine if that was the one you lost?" he joked. But then he saw the shock on my face and realized the same thing I did. It was my watch. Some stranger must have found it and hung it there, hoping the owner would spot it before leaving. The three of us stood there for a moment, just trying to process it. What were the odds? Then my friend stepped aside so I could jump up and grab it. The branch was just a little out of reach, but with a quick hop, I snatched it from the tree. The second my fingers touched it, though, I knew something was wrong. I landed, immediately dropped the watch, and stared at my hand. The thing was covered in a thick, almost see-through slime. It shimmered in the sunlight in a way that didn't seem natural. Worse, it felt all wrong. Sticky but also unnaturally cold. Colder than anything should have been in that warm weather. The goo stuck to my fingers. Instinctively, I started wiping them on the nearest patch of grass, grossed out beyond belief. My friends burst out laughing, cracking jokes about what it might be. And while, sure, their theory was mildly funny, it didn't explain what I had just touched. One of them guessed it might be sap. No way, I shot back. Touch it. Of course, he refused. But if it wasn't sap, what was it? And more importantly, how did my watch end up there, covered in that disgusting stuff? It wasn't Vaseline. It smelled awful, damp, musty, and just plain wrong. I washed my hands with the water from my bottle and briefly considered trying to clean the watch off too. But then I realized something. I didn't want it back. Not at all. At that point, the whole mood shifted. The fun, relaxed energy from earlier was gone. We hiked the rest of the way in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. A weird, unsettled feeling settled over us, one that lasted all the way home. Later, I tried to make sense of it. I did some research, hoping to find a natural explanation for the strange slime, but I came up empty. And it wasn't just the watch that haunted me. It was the feeling that we had stumbled across something that shouldn't be. As time passed, the memory of that trip faded into the background of everyday life. But every now and then, something would bring it back. A similar-looking watch, a story about weird occurrences in the woods, or news of someone disappearing on a trail. I've gone hiking since then, but I've never felt completely at ease. That once familiar sense of peace is gone, replaced by a lingering wariness. The trail still calls to me, but now there's an undercurrent of unease whenever I'm out there, because that watch, covered in something unexplainable, left for me to find in a way that defied logic. It was a small glimpse into the mysteries that might be hiding in the places we think we know.